Chapter 21. Sonny Corleone. Why was I such an asshole towards him? Why can't I just stop being that way for once? Michael stood there a while, contemplating as he felt something different now, which he couldn't quite explain. It was a very rare feeling for him. Was it shame? No. He knew what shame felt like, and he wasn't angry anymore. Well, he was, but that wasn't what was driving him at this moment. Then he looked up at the skies and saw the moon, and it began to scare him for some reason. What was up with those eyes? I don't see them anymore, but wow. They really spooked me there for a second, fucking feeling like they were gonna follow me forever. As that weird feeling continued to return in Michael, he thought about those eyes and the mad vibes he was getting from that big white head figure, and realized it all seemed very familiar. Like I know the person. He stood there for a while as the Mofongo Wilds finished looting and lit a match, and then left. Sirens could be heard now coming, and Michael decided it was time to ditch the scene as well. As he ran off, he remembered what Gabe had said about kissing crucifixes, and for some reason he felt like he wanted to do it. I did used to do it a lot, didn't I? So, as he took out his rosary, he kissed the crucifix at the end, and strangely enough, whatever strange feeling he was having before was gone, and he felt better again. Running across the street, Michael was nearly then run over by some guy on a motorcycle. He had his girl sitting to his back, holding on so very tender-like. Looking back at them as they passed, Michael remembered how it was when he was with Nikki. Before going to prison and before that night. The 70s. It was the late 70s, and almost days away from turning into a new decade. Disco wasn't dead yet, but anyone that still had the heart of rock and roll, it was really starting to get annoying. Studio 54 could kiss our fucking asses. We want some real music was a battle cry on the streets and of the bloody Shamrocks. And Michael had his dad's old 49 Triumph Thunderbird modded up and looking slick enough for a new decade. Michael spent most of those days riding around with his girl Nikki to his back, feeling like a young Marlon Brando and living the life of a teenage dream, even though already over 20. Over his 20s, basically, in his 20s at that point. That night, he got to the Tropic of Cancer to meet up with the Shamrocks to see what's up. The place was more of a biker joint back then before the cyberpunks took over, and it still had a lot of artist types there, and not just your average biker bar with your stereotypical wild ones, rows of pool tables, and a foxy chick in a pigskins collecting up all the attention. You had a lot of your poor man's Jack Kerouac wannabes there, not disciplined enough to sit down and consolidate their thoughts into poetry on paper, but definitely disciplined enough to run an outrageous bar tab. Hey Maddie, it was Sass Boy, and what an arrogant little prick he was. But then again, the type of prick you just love listening to shit talk a storm. Every outfit had to have one. That one guy that would always instigate a fight when your enemies, just when you thought things were going to settle all civil-like with them. Of course, between Sad Boy's bark and Madboy's bite, for the bloody Shamrocks, things settling peacefully was almost always a rare occasion. Plus, Michael eventually became a shit-talking force to be reckoned with himself. Back in the Shamrock days, Michael would hang out with Sass Boy a lot, and not because he liked him. At least at that point, Madboy was just a mad boy and barely even verbal. He liked his fists to do all the talking, but he felt like expanding his horizons. Even though he found Sass Boy as one unapologetic, annoying piece of shit, something in Michael wanted to get a grasp of all that verbiage. And you'd think I clusterfuck the shit out of a sentence and not know the half of what it means. And so he started hanging out with him. He did it so just to customize himself to his attitude and abilities as a shit talker. And eventually he got the groove down and began to understand what it really say to take a man off and make them go hog wild, just how I like it. And eventually Michael felt like he even surpassed Sass Boy, which led him to stop hanging out with him. Hey, maybe if he had some redeeming qualities, I wouldn't have just dished him like that. Such an unapologetical, annoying piece of shit through and through. Hey, if you two shag rabbits done lollygagging, Rat Boys has something to say inside the tropic, yapped Sass Boy. Michael and Nicky were sitting in missionary position on the Thunderbird making out. Hey, come on, you two can make porno elsewhere. Another time, let's go, yapped Sass Boy again. A pause. Chop, chop, let's go, Alonzo. Don't make me get up and fuck you instead, called out Michael, testing his spit against Alonzo's. Anytime, sugar lips, anytime, dished out Alonzo as he blew Michael a kiss. So, Nicky, should we go in and see what the brains has to say now? Asked Michael. Brains? Radboy has brains? Replied Nicky with an eyebrow raised in question. Being sarcastic. You know him and his plans. He's always trying to get us to follow along on some half-baked shit. Stupid scheme. Yeah, and you always have to be there to ruin it his day, continued Nicky. True, maybe I should give him a break and not get involved this time. Fine by me, replied Nicky, rolling her eyes. Hey, Alonzo, we ain't going in, called out Michael. Come on, Maddie, this sounds important. I don't give a shit. He can do without me. Fine, finished off Sass Boy as he went in. Michael was really lucky to have a girl like Nicky, an uptown girl from the other side of the train tracks. Of course, as caring and as loving as she was in her own way, Michael always worried that part of her was into, him to resolve some daddy issues or something. Having her typical overbearing rich father, she was the silver spoon-fed and raised daughter that might have just grown a lust for the bad boys in her boredom. And Michael was just a means to pass the time until she upgraded to some college football star or jet pilot in some Navy or Air Force something. Michael never understood how much it really pained him to think that way. But it did. But at the time, Michael was still young, stupid, stupider, and getting some, so it didn't bother him that much. Plus, she also legitimately did seem to be into him, and just for him. They had a wild and lustful start, and since then they had really formed a bond, all thanks to Mary. What's wrong, Michael? What are you thinking about? Asked Nicky. Michael shrugged and said, Actually, my sister, funny enough. That's how Michael had met her. Her and Michael's sister were best friends in high school. The tension felt between Michael and Nicky meeting the first time was like Stan Kowalski meeting Blanche Dubois was. Yeah, that's at least how I felt for some reason. Except for, no Stella, Nicky not being some crazy old southern dame, and if Blanche Dubois had just given into that temptation for something that thick, hard, and sweaty. Well, that's how I felt about that movie, the Streetcar Named Desire. I never liked Stella, and I always felt really, really sorry for Blanche. She really needed someone strong like Stan to stick by her side, and if she had, maybe she wouldn't have turned out so crazy. But then again, Stan was also a douchebag that would beat women, so I love Brando, hate that character. Thought Michael as Nicky noticed him staring off like he sometimes did. What movie you thinking about, Michael? Asked Nicky, knowing how sometimes during these spells he'd fall deep into thought over cinema. Oh, nothing, responded Michael with a shrug. Nicky began to eye Michael all antsy-like, but seeing how Michael had fallen out of the mood to make out some more, which was hardly ever the case for him, Nicky decided to spin the rhetoric over the sister. So how has Mary been? Asked Nicky, obviously not very interested, since she and Mary had a falling out some years ago. Mary's fine, but I don't know about her boyfriend, though, that little weasel, responded Michael as he cringed up some. I told her that guy was a creep years ago, actually, but I don't know, I guess your sister's just into guys like that, said Nicky, while seeming to be hiding something which Michael was all too used to from her personality. Don't fucking say that, she doesn't know better. She's mistaken his sleazy, obsessive manners as charm or something. Stop, maybe we should go inside, said Nicky. Nicky's question had put Michael off, and his temper was beginning to change the mood some more. Nicky, knowing how overly emotional Michael would get to the slightest thing, decided not to press it. After a short, awkward pause, that's when it happened. Michael and Nicky then noticed Alonzo stepping out of the tropic again, with a worried look on his face, and said, Hey, Michael, your sister was on the line. What? Called out Michael. She sounded like she was crying, and then the line was cut off. A second passed as Nicky heard a teapot beginning to whistle. Oh, really? replied Madboy, as the whistle grew louder. Sassboy went inside, and Nicky began to notice Michael's hand was quaking, as the whistle was now loud enough to boil over. "No, Michael, don't go. Something doesn't sound right. I'll go see Mary," said Nicky, eyeing Michael distressingly. No, I'll go. Plus, you two haven't even talked to each other since we got together. Michael, don't be stupid. This sounds like something out of... As the movie popped into Michael's head, his anger evaporated a bit over the silliness of that notion. What, a movie? You saying I'm Sonny Corleone about to go get machine gunned down at some toll booth by some numbskulls? Sneered out Michael. Michael, don't worry. Stupid coincidental shit like that only happens in movies. I'm just gonna go kill that fucking creep, that's all, replied Michael as Nicky got off and Michael took off. Of course, when Michael got to the apartments Mary was living in, he found a different scene. The building was on fire, and neither the cops nor the fire department were there yet. There was a crowd standing off in a safe distance from the building, and Michael started scrambling about looking to find his sister's face within the crowd. Oh, she isn't still in... Michael saw one of his sister's neighbors, Miss Gilmore, sitting on the curb, staring at the burning building. She was covered in soot, holding her cocker spaniel. "Gilmore, where's Mary? Where's my sister?" cried out Michael. "Michael, I think she's still inside. I didn't see her come out and with the building with the rest of us on the 5th floor," responded Miss Gilmore. Michael freaked hearing this, as his adrenaline began pumping tar through his veins, for he now knew he had to go in. Once Michael had built up the audacity to do this, Michael rushed in and began trying to make it to the staircase. Luckily, the 1st floor wasn't engulfed in flames, but Michael knew it was going to be a raging inferno the higher he got. As Michael ran up, reaching the 3rd floor, he was nearly knocked on his ass from the wall of heat permeating from the flames all around. And there seemed to be no avoiding it. Michael's eyes began tearing up, and his nose ran like a broken faucet. He then covered his face up with his shirt. As he made his advance, finally reaching the 5th floor, Michael had to crawl his way around as the heat pressure continued building up around him. Crawling down the hallway, Michael was finally up at Mary's door. Michael kicked in the door and started searching the rooms. After a minute of searching, Michael realized his sister wasn't anywhere to be found. Where the hell is she? Where the hell? Michael couldn't take the fumes anymore. As he started coughing up mucus, his lungs felt like they were stuffed with ash, and Michael reluctantly decided to vacate. Running down the hallway in the crouch position, he finally got to the stairs and nearly ran down a firefighter. In the process, the firefighter gave Michael a gas mask and covered him up with one of their flame-retardant jackets. "Come on, we need to get you out of here," said the fireman. "I think my sister's still in this building," cried out Michael. "What? No, I'm sorry. We need to go." Michael was quickly rushed down by 2 firefighters, as more of them made up with axes. They were on the street again. The firefighters then tried to get him into an ambulance. But Michael refused being taken into the hospital, and before he could run back over to the crowd to see if his sister had come out, Mary's disembodied voice called out to him. "Mary, where are you?" And looking around, Michael saw her. She was inside one of the ambulance trucks, and Michael then freaked to see how her face was charred with 3rd-degree burns, looking as if it was about to melt off. "Mary," cried out Michael. Mary seemed to try and call back to him, but was quickly sustained as the ambulance drove off. Michael felt fated now. He fell down to his knees and nearly lost consciousness. Looking around, he then saw them. In the crowd, he saw 2 numbskulls, laughing and pointing up at the burning building. And this made Michael suspicious. Fucking numbskulls. How can you laugh at a sight like... Wait. Could it be them? This isn't anywhere near the turf. Did they start this fire? Michael then got up as his teapot began to whistle again and seemed about ready to boil over. As he took a couple of breaths to consolidate his energy and his convictions, the teapot then exploded as Michael rushed in and attacked the 2 numbskulls head on. "You motherfuckers, you did..." Madboy sacked both of them to the ground and began popping them all over. One of the police officers saw this outbreak and ran over to intervene. as Michael went into full gear, beating them down to the pulp. Die, motherfucker, die! Madboy was really trashing at them, too, and seemed like he was aiming to kill them good. As the police officer grabbed him from the back, he tried to pry him off but failed to do so. Then the numbskull that Michael had a hold of began laughing, as he choked up with blood and then said, "Madboy sends his regards." After that, more bulls rushed in to intervene and eventually got Michael off the two, but Michael wasn't done, not just yet. "Let me kill him! Let me fucking kill him! Fuck you, pigs!" Michael was already in full gear, berserk mode, wanting blood, anyone's blood. So once he noticed the bulls were stepping in, he then started popping them senseless instead. It took 5 police officers to try and hold him down as they piled on top, but even then Madboy muscled his way out and ran it back over to the numbskulls, who were all bloodied up and nearly unconscious, to see if he could finish the job. By the end of that night, Michael had put 2 officers in the hospital, both numbskulls, and besides the numbskulls, one of those officers was also in severe condition. When the day of his trial came, it didn't matter what Michael's motives were, nor did his plea matter that it was all in the heat of a moment of an emotional outburst. With Michael's previous criminal record and his history of violence, Judge Bonhoeffer found him to be a danger to society and sentenced him to hard time in Attica State Prison. Fortunately, though, Michael never got any of his victims killed, or that would have meant a heavier sentence of manslaughter, although one of the numbskulls was beaten so bad that he was probably going to end up living the rest of his life eating food through a straw, but Michael saw justice in that. Good. That at least is the right sort of fucking justice they deserved outside of killing him. In prison, Madboy thought about his release and how he'd confront the other numbskull for what his chum told him, which still rang in Michael's ear. Madboy sends his regards? Since when have numbskulls been able to speak so good? Well, Radboy sends his regards. That's just something Radboy would teach them to say. He would. Michael hardly had any visitors during his stay. Nikki had come by a couple of times, but eventually she stopped coming, especially after what Michael told her about that night. "Michael, they said that to confuse you. Why would Radboy set up such a thing?" Nikki had said, but Michael kept insisting it must have been true. He demanded her to stay away from him, especially after Nikki, told him that she and Radboy might... "Radboy, are you fucking serious?" Michael had cried out in disbelief. "Maybe. Radboy keeps hitting on me and I don't know." Nikki had responded. "But wait, what about us? What about us?" But then Nikki broke out with a contemptuous glare to that line, a look in which Michael quickly picked up on that made him grow sullen. It was becoming apparent now that Nikki was no longer willing to hold onto anything of their past, especially with everything that had now happened. Not simply from that look alone, but the more Michael tried to cling on to Nikki with rhetoric after that, the more she seemed to want to pull away, her face moving away centimeter by centimeter with every word he spoke. And once Nikki seemed about ready to leave, it was then that Michael realized that he was on his own. "Nikki, what about us?" cried out Michael again, completely out of character, desperately almost. No, not just almost. Never been so weak. Never felt so weak for most of my life. Being that fucking pathetic with someone I could never be pathetic with. Damn. Nikki cringed up a bit, glared at Michael, looking a bit saddened, and said nothing. Then she turned and tried to walk away. "Nikki!" cried out Michael again. "I'll see you when you get out, Michael, I promise," she said, while keeping her back to Michael. Michael then spent the next few weeks thinking about what he had seen and heard. Nikki had also told him how she had gotten an easy-picking job in Uptown thanks to her dad, who she mentioned had recently passed away, as an assistant in a network programming department or something. And with that, Madboy figured Radboy had finally gotten his one-way ticket to the mainstream living. It was all too convenient, like Radboy now living the high life with Michael's girl by his side, and Michael himself left rotting away in some slammer. Now the present. "Why were you so cold to me, Nikki?" "Fucking was it Because I was fucking that pathetic sounding to you at the time? That fucking bitch! Michael felt something truly out of character. A rage inside. An unimaginable rage and whoa. What the fuck, Michael? That also ain't you. Damn it, that's not me. Michael felt himself stepping into uncharted territory within himself. Shit he didn't like, and all because of her. Obviously, this all did matter a lot to him. Obviously, probably more than he would ever know. And if that, maybe it would be best if I didn't. Since it made Michael seem weak. And Michael, Madboy, being weak? Don't even get me started. Don't ever get me started. Michael then sighed and then started thinking of her again. But why? Why should I? How much more time and thoughts do I have to invest in it, huh? Michael sighed again and allowed himself to do so. It also seemed like she was hiding something. She was hiding something. I couldn't then I still can't understand what it is and what it was. Thought Michael as he continued making his way to Big Dick's gym. While thinking about Nikki again and pulled out his rosary and kissed the crucifix twice. Then placed it back in his pocket, and then Michael began to feel a bit better about himself But then he started picturing Radboy again with Nikki at his side. Fucking Radboy. Fucking fag boy, more like it. That stuttering, stammering, backstabbing twerp that I used to be at least considered to be a friend. Someone I had grown to know over the years, which meant something to me at least. But absolutely nothing to him, I guess. Fucking Radboy sends his regards. Fucker's gonna pay. Pay for what he did to me and to my sister.